Welcome to Beyond the Valley, a CNBC Tech podcast with Arjun Karpal and Tom Chitty.
Beyond the Valley.
When will AI be smarter than humans? Not if, but when. Asking themselves the same question are many of the 150,000 visitors who are attending VivaTech in Paris, which, as you've probably worked out already, is where we're recording this week's episode, which is a first for Beyond the Valley. And as such, we're joined by a special guest to discuss why AI is all anyone in tech wants to talk about.
Beyond the Valley.
Usually at this point, Bassem, I ask Arjun what he's been up to over the weekend, and he gives me some inane answer about how he's been barbecuing and talking about various meats.
I did do a barbecue, actually, to be fair.
That's the whole point. We're not going there.
Okay, right.
We're not going there.
Got you.
Thankfully, we're going to start this episode by introducing you. You are the head of sales at Hugging Face, and it says on your LinkedIn page that Hugging Face helps businesses build their digital future with machine learning. So, for our listeners, Bassem Asseh, what does Hugging Face do? Who are Hugging Face?
Thanks for inviting me first, and thanks a lot for being in Paris at VivaTech. 150,000 people, I think, around us, more or less. Hugging Face is probably the home of the open source AI community. This is where the AI community lives, grows, thrives. In a very concrete manner, it's a platform, it's a website where AI builders and AI people who want to become AI builders can come and find documentation, content, learning material, and most important, research papers, data sets, and models. So AI builders, this is where they will be learning how to build AI and also accessing the building blocks of their AI journey.
Okay. Before we get into talking about AI, we have, of course, got to do a bit of housekeeping. Sorry, bear with us. If you'd like to keep, this is for our listeners, and actually you could subscribe as well if you wanted to. We have a Beyond the Valley newsletter, which is packed with the best international tech stories from CNBC. You can subscribe by heading to cnbc.com/Beyond the Valley. Click on the subscribe button and it will drop in your inbox every Friday. Now, time for Stat of the Week. So, I'm going to just give you a quick rundown. It's pretty simple, actually. Arjun gives a stat that's usually related to what we're talking about in this week's episode. And then at the end of the episode, I have to come up with some sort of answer. Now, I have a 50-50 strike rate, but I'm up against you today. So you and I are going head-to-head on Stat of the Week. And I'm excited, but I'm also very nervous. So, Arjun, let's hear it.
This is so exciting. I'm so excited. I've always wanted to host a game show, so this is my chance. So, contenders, the stat of the week is 4 billion euros. 4 billion euros.
Fantastic.
Yep.
I keep it in my mind over the course of the episode. Sometimes the stat comes out by accident, and he reveals without realizing. So just,
sometimes if you have a listen during the talk, you might hear the answer.
Absolutely. Okay, just a final point. If you want to contact Arjun and I, or you want to ask us a question, follow-up question about this episode, maybe you have something for Bassem you want to ask him, then you can email us at beyondthevalley@cnbc.com and we will get back to you. Right, before we get into AI, the full AI question, let's talk a little bit about VivaTech, because I think that will lead us nicely into AI. How's VivaTech gone for you, Bassem, so far? And what has really caught your eye in terms of the sort of key themes that are happening over this week?
I was here last year, so that was 12 months ago, and AI was starting to be something very well known, but not like this year. This year, it's really AI everywhere, and it's not just an advertising thing just to talk about AI. Really, AI is everywhere. If you look at all of the industries that are present here, various companies, and all of them have something to say about AI, whether something that they have already did, whether it's something that they are building. Everyone has something to say about AI. and that's great news, and that's real change since last year.
I think the interesting question here, and what we want to flesh out over this episode, is where are we in the AI journey now, and where are we going when we begin to talk about things like artificial general intelligence? So as you said, AI is everywhere. It's everywhere. There's an AI avenue here as well. So when we talk about AI, what is it right now that is actually being produced, coming to market, and the things that are gaining traction? You know, we've talked a lot about ChatGPT over the past year and a half, these generative AI models. So as you look at it, what exactly, when it comes to AI, is happening and gaining traction now?
Yeah, what we are seeing, what we have been seeing in the last 2 years, year and a half, 2 years in the AI landscape is amazing. I come from the software development world. I used to be with GitHub for 7 years, a bit more. And what I have seen in the last 18 months here in the AI landscape, it has nothing to do with anything I saw before, neither in the software development tooling, neither in software vendors and document management. I'm in this industry for the last maybe 20, 25 years. And what I have seen in the last 18 months is spectacular. Probably between December 22 and January, February 23, when people started actually using ChatGPT, people who were not AI builders, people who were not data scientists, not machine learning engineers, people from every area of the business and of NGOs and of government agencies started playing with AI a bit, thanks to ChatGPT. So ChatGPT, to a certain extent, democratized what machine learning is, what AI is, and that's what we have seen probably in the first 6 months of last year. And then the second half of the year, what we have seen in various industries, whether it's financial services, whether it's manufacturing, are companies trying to build their own flavor of what generative AI could be, building POCs, most of the time using proprietary models like the one from Anthropic, the one from OpenAI. And then came at the end of the year, probably like 5-6 months from now, the big question like, okay, we have these POCs, great use cases, now let's take them to production. And this is where the complexities started. Is this compliant with my guardrails? Is this compliant with the safety, security? Is this compliant with licensing, potential licensing issues? And most important, also the cost of the whole thing. I mean, fine-tuning a model or training a model, okay, it has a cost, but the recurring cost is the one that is related to production. So should we take those POCs to production? And most of the customers we have been talking to in the second half of 23 and in the first 4 or 5 months of this year are mostly focusing on what are the actual models that they want to take really into production, not only build POCs on them. So proofs of concept are great, are amazing, especially in a very innovative domain like the one we are talking about. But moving to production is another story. And moving to production potentially pushed people to consider alternatives, including open source alternatives, including various models that the open source community offer, various flavors of those models, and of course the capacity to customize those models and to take the whole thing to production with the most efficient and with the best balance between the quality of what is generated, because we are talking about generative AI, and the cost of what is expected from production. Cost meaning environmental, but also financial.
I want to talk a little bit about the key competitors in the space, but just to give our listeners an idea, if they didn't know, they know what Hugging Face does now, but kind of how big you guys are. I think current valuation is around $4.5 billion. You have backers that include the likes of NVIDIA, Amazon, Google, or Alphabet, Google. So just within that context, who do you think are the sort of the big players, the key people for us as listeners, as journalists to watch out for?
I think that's probably part of what we will be seeing and double checking in the next few months. Of course, big tech companies will always be there. I mean, they have the compute capacity, and when it comes to building AI solutions, compute capacity is crucial. Data is of course crucial, but compute capacity is crucial. Plus the skill set, of course. So big tech companies definitely have all of those. They have data sets, they have infrastructure, they have the skill set. They have been working on AI models. These are, in my opinion, the 4 pillars on which you can build the whole building. So big techs They are there, they will still be there, of course. Now the big question mark is who else is gonna be there? Like, of course, now most people who are interested in tech know about OpenAI, know about Anthropic, know about a certain number of other companies who are specialized in Mistral, for example, because we are in Paris, of course. Companies that are focusing on building models, making them available, either from a B2C perspective or in a B2B perspective. Now, what will be included in the next wave of creative and innovative people who are building the companies that are being built now and have been built in the last year or so? That's the big interesting thing that we need to watch in the next few months and couple of years. On our side at Hugging Face, we do not consider ourselves as a company that builds and provides one model or various flavors of one model. We're not in that domain. We are the platform where the open source community grows, meaning that independent developers, big tech companies, academics, when they work on a data set, when they work on models, when they have a research paper they are building and writing, all this is published on Hugging Face, which means that this is where the community lives. So you can both come and download models there, but you can also come and publish your models there. So this is the showcase of the community. And at the same time, it's also the workshop of the community. So people work together there and show what they have been working on there. So as a platform, we are offering as much as we can the possibility for the community, be it companies, startups, academics, independent developers, to have all what they need in order to be creative, to be innovative, to fix a certain number of challenges thanks to AI, meaning building flavors of existing models of AI or building new models from scratch. Think about Meta and Llama. They have built this model, and a certain number of community members have been building and developing flavors of it. For example, the Llama that takes care of biology, the Llama that takes care of other domains, and the same with other families of models. So our intention is to democratize good AI, good machine learning, and that's what we consider is very important in order to get the other startups also build on top what the community is building and help them also grow.
Bassem, I want to get into the debate on open source versus closed a bit later on, but just because you've been mentioning the term, can you just quickly lay out what exactly you mean by open source AI, just for our listeners?
Sure. So for people who have been having a look at the tech industry for the last 20, 30 years, one of the main trends was initially the tech industry was mostly about proprietary software, and then we started seeing open source software competing against proprietary software. Open source software being a software for which you have access to the source code, so you can see what has been written, how it has been written, potential bugs, potential improvements, etc., etc.
So a good example here would be Apple's iOS versus Google Android.
Yeah.
Android being open source, iOS being proprietary Apple, right?
Exactly. And if you want to go back to the people who are a bit older, think about Windows, like Windows 25 for those who knew it, and think about Linux on the other hand. So these were competing at the beginning, and because one is open source, it started being adopted and adapted by the community, by the enterprises, and open source software became more and more innovative. So that was open source. Now that we are focusing on AI, something pretty similar exists. So you have companies who offer most of their models in a proprietary flavor. Proprietary meaning that you do not have access to all the details that are included in the model. For example, the data set that has been used in order to train the model. Just an example of what could be opened. So open source models or open models, open LLMs, for example, are models for which you have all the documentation that is made available. You know exactly what, or more or less exactly what data set has been used in the training process, and a certain number of other details about that model. So for the sake of explaining things easily, I'm talking about closed and open, proprietary and open.
And
actually, it's somewhere in between most of the time.
And you can obtain that open source and then tweak it and tinker with it to then develop your own.
Exactly, and you
software.
can obtain it, and not only obtain it, potentially you could obtain it for free. Meaning that you're not paying you're not buying it and you're not renting it, which is not the case with proprietary models, which was not the case previously with proprietary software. So I was saying that it's usually, for the sake of making it easy to understand, I'm talking about closed and open, but actually in most cases, we are somewhere in between both. Typically, for example, depending on the license of the open model that we are talking about, you will have something that you can download, adjust, reuse, and depending on the license, you could potentially sell what you have been building, or you're not allowed to sell it because the license forbids you from selling it. So you would give it back to the community again. So depending on the kind of license, you have more or less openness, more or less details about what the model is, how it has been built, more or less capacity to reproduce it, to modify it, to adjust it, and potentially to build business on it.
The open v closed debate is one that's happening now with AI models, and I think there are many who will look at mobile and say, well, you can have both. Both will exist. First question, will both types of models exist? Secondly, with open source, one of the criticisms is that these models are extremely powerful and getting more and more powerful. The parameters are getting larger, and potentially the ability for these AI models to get to better reasoning, et cetera, is on the way. And therefore, they shouldn't be open because there's no guardrails around them. So firstly, in the future, do you see open and closed coexisting? And secondly, what about that specific criticism of open source?
I think the safety degree is, the argument can be used both ways. First, we can consider that because it's open, then anyone can use it, reuse it, build something on it, and do something bad with it. That's one possibility. But the other possibility is also that you have one company who owns the most impressive and most powerful AI, and then it keeps it for itself, and then it becomes a monopoly, and then you can imagine dystopian novels that we all think about, of course. So in both cases, guardrails are needed. The advantage that I see in the open side of the world, disclaimer, I have been working in open source for the last 20 years, so it's normal that I'm really pushy about, I'm really bullish about open source. But that being said, having access to the details of how the model has been built, on which data sets it has been built, trained, etc., having the possibility to adjust things means that everyone can see if something goes wrong and when it goes wrong, and potentially propose and offer corrections and fixes to that thing that is going wrong. So that's the advantage, of course, of open source. Also, what we have seen in the software era versus the AI era that we are in today, usually when you have bugs, when you have security failures in the open source world, it's pretty quickly seen because you have a much bigger community looking at it and fixing it. So in theory, even from a safety perspective, using open source models or open source solutions means that if there is a huge failure, something done on purpose or not on purpose, something really bad, well, it will be seen by the community, it will be fixed by the community. So that's also a strength.
So I think the AI safety debate is one I think we're going to need another episode for on this one, Tom, because it's a big one. But I just want to bring it back to where we kind of started from, which was, where are we now in terms of AI? So just if we look at the AI stack, if it were, we've got companies like NVIDIA providing the semiconductors required for the training, selling those to the hyperscalers and other companies who are training these vast models, and then selling those products to their cloud services. And then you've got the next layer, that application layer. And that's what I want to talk about as well. We were speaking to somebody earlier who was saying that actually we've got all the training. They were trying to implement an AI product at a bank, and it took them 7 certifications, 6 months, all of this difficulty to get it into actual production, into use here. So I think my question to you, Bassem, from what you see is, what is demand like from business in terms of wanting AI in business? And secondly, how easy is it really when these businesses want to do it?
So maybe two aspects of the question. First, on the startup front, on the smaller side of the economy. The infrastructure that is needed, earlier I was mentioning 4 pillars on which you can build your AI journey. I talked about infrastructure, I talked about the skill set, I talked about the models, and I talked about the data sets. The infrastructure is a serious question. Like it's not like, when you are developing a software, you just need to focus on writing the code. Then you provide the code to someone who takes it to production on some infra. You don't need to take care of that. In building the AI process, it's absolutely not the case. You need to take into account the infrastructure as early as possible in the design process and development process, because that's where you will be fine-tuning or even training your model. So if you do not have access to the right level of compute capacity, to the right level of infrastructure, and you are a startup and most of the time you are not able to buy that capacity, then you are stuck. And if you are stuck, you cannot innovate, you cannot fix new problems, you cannot imagine new frontiers. And that's not a good thing from an innovative economy point of view. So what we have decided last week, and Clem DeLong announced it, our CEO and co-founder announced it last week, we decided to launch one initiative that is called Zero GPU. Zero GPU is a way for us to share compute capacity up to a value of $10 million that we are funding for academics, for startups, for independent developers, for them to have that access to the infrastructure. Remember those 4 pillars? They now have access to that first pillar, which allows them to build on it and create something new, create some innovative applications, as you were mentioning, applications. So for us, democratizing good machine learning, part of it is done thanks to this zero GPU capacity and that we are offering, and the investment that we are doing. That's on the startup front and innovation front, and also academics and research labs. On the big tech side, and also with all the other companies, financial services, manufacturing, chemicals, you name it, they have a certain number of use cases that they are currently fulfilling thanks to traditional software. The difference between traditional software and AI is that with traditional software, it's pretty simple, like rather simple process. If this, then that, more or less. I'm making it simple on purpose. With AI, you can open possibilities that you do not have with software currently. So potentially, you can have, instead of having someone at a customer contact center of your telco operator, for example, if you call your telco operator, someone will answer you and you will ask your question about, why is my contract having this clause? I don't really understand it. What can you tell me about it? The human agent that is behind the phone and answering your question, today, if he uses a traditional software, he will go to something that looks like Google, a search engine. He will write your question or what he understood is your question, and he will expect some information being sent to him through a knowledge base coming out of some database, etc. With the chatbot capacity, he will be using natural language, exactly the same question that you have asked, and he will get an answer that will be also something that he can just read and potentially elaborate on, so it will be much more fluid. And in terms of customer service, most likely it will be much better in terms of customer satisfaction, of course, which means that your telco operator, you will be happy with them and you will renew, avoid churn. So this means that they will be increasing the revenue, etc., or at least avoiding diminishing revenue, etc., etc. So from a business perspective, there are lots of use cases that are currently done by humans thanks to software that can continue being done by humans thanks to AI, but in a much more accurate content generation. And potentially at some stage, some of those questions that you ask do not need to go through a human agent. Then we would ask human agents to focus on most complex questions, and the simple questions you would get them through a chatbot by yourself. I'm giving a use case that is pretty simple that you can come across on a day-to-day basis, but there are things that are much more complex.
Yeah, because I was thinking, you are the central hub for these developers. So you must be reading about some pretty wacky, out there use cases for AI. I was reading an article the other day about the Bumble, the dating app founder, talking about an AI concierge who does your dating for you and meets up with another AI concierge, and you go through thousands of these concierges and you figure out who would be the perfect match for you. And are we moving into a world where we're going to have these sort of digital proxies who are going to be going to the shops for us, doing our dating for us, cooking our food for, or deciding what we eat? Is that where we're heading?
I don't think anyone is able to imagine all the use cases that are possible out there, simply because human imagination is unlimited. So whatever I can think of, someone can think even even deeper or something much more complex or much more creative than what I'll be thinking of. My impression is that there are a certain number of use cases from a B2B side, from business to business side, that can be done much better when it comes to using AI versus using traditional software on one hand. And on the other hand, from a B2C perspective, from business to consumer perspective, I think the consumers will have a certain number of things that they will still want to do by themselves because they like doing it. Like typically dating, for example, typically shopping. I mean, when you are shopping your clothes, maybe it's something that you like to do, so you'll continue doing it. But if you hate it, then it's fine. Some kind of solution will be there to do it for you, or at least to propose things that you can accept or refuse. Because at the end of the day, you're still a free person, free will. You are able to decide whether you want to go that path or not go that path. One thing I wanted also to highlight is the fact that from a business-to-business perspective, if we go back to that area, many people ask themselves and ask me, and even I ask also the question to the people I come across in enterprises. What does that mean for your human resources? What does that mean from a skill set perspective? And most likely what will be happening is you will ask repeatable tasks to be taken care of through, just like what we did with software 20 years ago or 30 years ago, or even more. You would continue doing this with AI, except it will be a bit more complex tasks. But there will always be tasks where you will need the human person to be doing them, augmented with AI. So imagine one person augmented with AI, whether we are talking about building cars, for example, in manufacturing, or whether we are talking about the customer contact center that I mentioned earlier. So most likely it will be a mix of both. That's what I'm seeing, at least until now.
Bassem, I want to get your take on some interesting comments I heard this week from the CEO of Baidu, the Chinese tech giant. And Robin Lee, the CEO, was saying that actually right now, whilst we're seeing development of AI, there's no killer app. There's no killer app. You look at apps like Instagram, TikTok, etc., with hundreds of millions of daily users, but we haven't got anything of that kind in terms of the AI world at the moment. He also said that he thinks AI development's too slow and needs to speed up. What's your take on those two things? Because I just thought they were quite interesting and and almost put a bit of cold water on a lot of the hype we've been hearing too.
One answer probably is there is AI in places where we don't see that there is AI. Typically, for example, if you are scrolling all along a timeline, for example, and seeing data, there's probably a feature behind whatever app we are talking about. There's probably a feature behind that is studying what you are doing, taking into account your own behavior in order to offer you the next thing you will be scrolling at. You see what I mean? So, and in that case, you have a recommendation AI that is made available in the application or in your social media app, for example, that you are using every day. There is an AI behind it that is preparing what's the next thing you are going to see, and it's being built thanks to AI. So it's not always an app that is only about AI in a very transparent manner. Most of the time, it will be a building block within something that is bigger, typically the recommendation AI.
Let's move the conversation on, because at the top we talked about, we alluded to artificial general intelligence, and it's something that a lot of people are maybe concerned about, or how far away this is. I think, there was someone recently said it's not 1 year or two, it's 10 years at least.
That was the Baidu CEO as well. He was saying it's more than 10 years away.
Yeah.
Elon Musk, meanwhile, thinks it could be just 2 years away.
Yeah.
And Baidu CEO said it's more than 10 years away. So,
yeah. What do you think?
The problem is no one has one specific definition about what AGI, what artificial general intelligence is. And it's not only because you have added a letter in the acronym that it becomes something really strong. I mean, we need to have a definition to decide if it's feasible, not feasible, completely crazy, or something doable in the next 5-6 years, depending on this and this and this criteria, constraints, opportunities. So in my opinion, the artificial general intelligence trend, that thing that everyone is talking about, is not that important, at least for the time being. My feeling when I talk to companies and think about not only tech companies, think about your bank, your insurance company, your telco operator, the car manufacturer of your car, if you have a car. These companies have use cases that do not need anything that comes close to artificial general intelligence. Most of the time they have use cases on which they need a smaller model, a model that is just at the right size for them, fine-tuned or customized on their own data set in order to be able to answer the exact question that their customer is asking. Typically, that additional clause that has been added to my contract, please, Mr. telco operator, why did you add it? What does it mean? What constraint or what additions it brings to my relationship to you? And in this case, you do not need anything close to artificial general intelligence. Like on a day-to-day, from a business perspective, on a day-to-day basis, you do not need to ask a question to your artificial intelligence about what happened on the 15th of May, 1915 during First World War. I mean, from a business usage, you never really come across that. But if you come across that question that you as a customer to your telco operator, and if the telco operator is not able to answer why this clause has been added to your agreement with them, then this is an issue. So you see, AGI is something that everybody's talking about, but from a business perspective, we are seeing people focusing on things that are much more concrete and I was going to say business friendly, but it's not the right word. Something that you can leverage from a business perspective. So these are smaller models, just the opposite of the artificial general intelligence. Smaller models trained on your own data, because your data, that's your business actually, and you're the only one who have that data. And then you would have your customized model. You would potentially be building your own model for every use case you have, where AI can bring either more revenue or less cost.
So what is the point of AGI then?
Well, I guess it's probably I don't know if I have to go that path, but I was thinking about something a bit more metaphysical than concrete, something more philosophical about that artificial intelligence that is looks like a god able to give you all the answers that you want, or able to do things on your behalf, exactly everything on your behalf, which most likely is not what you are willing to use. And at the same time, I think with every trend comes the positive side of it, and something that generates a bit more skepticism or fear, if you want. And probably that's what we are getting with artificial general intelligence. But at the same time, the definition of that is not yet accepted by everyone. I mean, we're not there yet.
We recently found out that the EU approved the AI Act. There's obviously, whenever we get into a new technology, new industry that emerges, regulation is on the tip of a lot of people's tongues, on the businesses as well as the regulators' side. What's your view on it? Are you happy about it?
So it's always a bit tricky. Just like I was talking about open source and closed source earlier, it's easy to say it's either open or closed. The reality is somewhere in between. Hopefully the closest possible to the open side of the world. And when it comes to regulation, it's more or less the same. If you regulate too much, probably you will be blocking some of the innovations that can happen. And if you absolutely do not regulate, then potentially you could also fall into some problems and some difficulties that you're not able to control or to fix at some stage. So regulation, in my opinion, and yes, of course, you always need rules in a play, leveling the playing field also necessitates some rules, but at the same time, not too much rules, because otherwise innovation would be blocked. And we've seen it in the past. I mean, the history of economy, since at least the industrial age, has seen situations where the lack of regulations allowed innovations, but the too much regulation also probably created some issues. And at the same time, as I was saying, you need some rules, otherwise you do not play on the same field, right?
I'll have to ask your permission for this, Tom. Can I tell a story?
Yeah.
Because,
we can allow it. Okay. I'll allow it.
It's about VivaTech and AI. So I was in the Viva Lounge, which is a speakers area, and this is where all the sort of top-level speakers are going through before they go on stage. So I'm waiting around, and I see Arthur Mensch, who is the CEO of Mistral AI. Now, this is a fascinating story. Mistral AI, just over a year old, It's raised hundreds of millions of dollars. It's backed by Microsoft. It's valued at about 2 billion. There's reports that it's looking for around a 6 billion value. A 1-year-old company. Arthur Mensch comes out of the green room where he was waiting, immediately whisked into another room, finishes his meeting in that room, and him and his 2 associates pretty much run out the back door. And I think that was partly because he didn't want to be mobbed by journalists like myself, but also, by other startups wishing to meet him. Second story, Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic AI, another quite young company. I think it was founded in 2021, backed by Amazon. Again, lofty valuation. He came out of the Viva Lounge and was immediately mobbed by cameras and people wanting to speak to him. Now, this is not, Tim Cook or Satya Nadella or Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk. These are people who were probably relatively unknown till about 6 months ago, now being flocked. So the AI people are the new tech rock stars, aren't they, Bassem?
I saw it, what you were describing with Arthur, I saw it because I was at an event with here in Paris maybe 3 months ago. We had a round table. We were interviewed by the head of Salesforce here in France, and he was we were 4 people, and he was one of the 4, and I was one of the other 3. And definitely, I saw people at the end of the round table coming and asking him for his signature on some papers, autographs, wanting to take selfies with him, etc., etc. I think you can see the same thing with Elon Musk. I don't remember if with Steve Jobs back then we had something similar. But definitely the difference...
We definitely did. I mean, look, Arjun's still copying his sartorial style.
Yeah, of course he is. Of course he is. The thing is, my feeling is that the difference between back then and now is that all this, and you mentioned it, the whole thing happened in 12 months. 24 months maximum, right? And this is impressive. And this is also, I have to admit, thanks to ChatGPT, because I don't think there is an innovation that happened, a tech innovation that happened at some stage and has been used by so many people in such a short, adoption by the end user or end customer or B2C in such a short time. And that's probably what made the whole thing look like like the rock scene.
Right?
But, sorry.
You go ahead, Tom.
Well, no, the Cisco CEO recently said that, AI could power the stock market for the next decade. We've seen Nvidia just, grow 5-fold since the back end of 2022. Are we in the next sort of industrial tech revolution?
It's always tricky to use the word revolution, especially when you are in France, right? Especially when you are in Paris, right? Because we know what that is. London is good also on that side. But my feeling is the answer is yes, because it's a whole nother paradigm compared to software. And software by itself was something like a whole really revolution compared to what happened before. I'm old enough to have seen what happened when the email arrived, like in 1998, something like that, at least as far as I'm concerned, when I opened my very first hotmail.com email, and things changed then. Like things really changed back then. And my feeling is that what I felt back then, including from a daily business perspective, what we are seeing today is probably something similar. And most likely I'm not seeing how big it is right now, because it will most likely be much more than that. But we still need some time. Keep in mind that Llama, everybody's talking about Llama. Llama is the model that was built and made popular by Meta, and it's open source, by the way. So open source, it's not only about startups or independent developers, it's also about big techs. So Llama and Mistral, you were just mentioning just before, are only 1 year old. Not even 1 year old for Mistral. If I'm not wrong, it was just before summer. So, and all this is happening in only 12 months, 24 months. So we're still at the beginning of the story. Usually maybe I should not say that anymore because it's less true, but until a couple of months ago, I used to say we are probably at the end of prehistory and the beginning of history. If you compare this to the the history of human mankind, right? So we're still at the beginning. The train is accelerating, and it's going to continue accelerating even more and more. If you use the TGV or the Eurostar to go back to London, at the beginning it goes fast, but it's even faster afterwards. And I think we're not yet at cruise speed, like we're still probably very far from cruise speed.
I want to sort of bring all these different strands we've been talking about together and sort of offer a counterpoint to Tom as well. I'm not denying that AI is a technology that's going to be big and it holds a lot of promise, of course. But the reason I brought up that story in the Viva Lounge was not to show off that I was in the Viva Lounge.
A little bit.
But it was a little
It's
bit.
fine.
What do they call it? Humble brag.
Yeah.
So, but it was that and the AGI debate about this sort of sci-fi next level artificial intelligence. But are these things, the debate around AGI, the rock star status of these new tech startups, is this emblematic at this point in time of a bubble that's going to burst and the hype cycle come to an end for a period of time?
I think maybe you read articles or books about what happened at the end of the 90s, early 2000s. There is some kind of bubble that happened back then. But at the end of the day, even with that bubble happening, it didn't prevent all of us to use the internet as a new technology since that bubble. So the bubble probably is a way for things that are mostly about hype and not that much about concrete useful technology. This is where the hype disappears and the right technology continues on being built, used, improved, etc. So we might have something similar maybe this year, maybe next year. There's so much money that has been poured into this landscape that potentially that bubble could happen at some stage. But in my opinion, I don't see how this new set of technologies, because AI is not only about models or data sets, it's a certain number of things, including very, very classical code, libraries that are being built, etc. So under the hood, there is some real concrete technology, useful technology for businesses, NGOs, government agencies that is being improved on a day-to-day basis. So even if there is a bubble, I think the bubble will concern those who are not focusing on the technology that is under it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. But before we let you go, we have, of course, got to do Stat of the Week, which I feel... Hold on. Let's just hear it again one more time. Hold.
4 billion euros.
4 billion euros. See, okay, no, who's going to go first? Should we roll paper, scissors? No, I'll go first.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go with what I said at the top.
Right.
Which is the current valuation of Hugging Face.
No.
I was gonna say the same thing, but it's more in dollars actually. But
Yeah. So 4 billion euros.
I love how you're so flippant about how much your company's worth. Euros, dollars, same thing. Okay.
That would have been too easy.
It would have been too. I know.
So.
I just thought maybe because I hadn't showed him my intro or anything like that, and then anyway.
Yeah. No, but it's not that. No, 4 billion euros.
Okay. Do you want to have another go?
Okay, I'll give you a clue. It's based on a recent news story about France.
Who is investing 4 billion in France? One of the big techs is investing that amount in France.
You're close. Who?
Go on.
Is it AWS or Microsoft? I don't remember. AWS, I think. Microsoft.
Yeah, Microsoft. Yes.
Well done. I knew I'd lose that one.
Yeah. And just a few fun other facts as well while we're at it. The French government says that 3.2 billion euros were raised in 2022 by AI companies. We got some data through from PitchBook that says the UK, France, and Germany accounted for around 83% of VC funding into generative AI last year.
Wow.
So that tells you the powerhouses in Europe right now in terms of the AI boom. And of course, it's a few companies. We're talking Mistral in France, Aleph Alpha in Germany. So this is interesting. But I think there's a lot to say, and we'll talk about this, about France's position in particular when it comes to AI. And that's been fascinating here as well.
I think it's probably related. Someone will write the history or the anthropology of that in a few years. But I think it's related to the focus that the French high schools and even primary schools have been putting on math, and the investment and focus that has been put on math in university and college, because AI is mostly about predicting what's happening next in terms of a sentence, a word, a paragraph, etc., a text or an image, and that's mostly about stats, right, like statistics. So I think there is something in there about what someone decided in some ministry here in Paris, maybe 50 years ago or 60 years ago even, to put some more focus on math compared to other disciplines at high school and at college, and this is where we are. We have the skill set.
Fantastic. What a great way to finish. Well, all I can say is thank you so much for joining us on Beyond the Valley, Bassem. It's been a real treat.
The first one on the road.
The first one on the road, and to have the head of sales of Hugging Face, Bassem Asseh, with us is fantastic. So thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot for inviting me, and good luck for the next ones, because being on the road, I guess, is not that easy, but it's much more fun, much more live, right?
Absolutely. That's it for this episode. Before we go, please follow and subscribe to the show and rate us. Thank you, Arjun.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Bassem.
Thanks.
We'll be back next week for another episode of Beyond the Valley. Goodbye.
Beyond the Valley.